This tree remembers a war it never fought, a drought it barely survived, a fire that burned 300 years before you were born. And somewhere inside you, so do you, have you ever felt something you couldn't explain? A sadness that didn't belong to any moment, an anxiety with no name, a heaviness in your chest that wasn't yours, and yet it was deeply, undeniably yours. You weren't imagining it. Science is beginning to prove what ancient cultures always whispered, that pain travels. That memory doesn't die with the person who lived it. That trauma is inherited. And if you want to understand how, truly understand, you don't need to start with a textbook. You need to start with a tree. Deep in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the fog-laced mountains of Japan, in pockets of wilderness that civilization somehow forgot to destroy. There are trees that were alive before Shakespeare wrote a single word. Some were seedlings when the Roman Empire was still standing. Some survived the medieval period, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution. They have watched ice ages retreat and oceans rise, and they recorded all of it. Every single year of a tree's life is written into its body. A ring of wood, wide in years of abundance, when rain was generous and sunlight was kind. Narrow, sometimes heartbreakingly thin, in years of drought, disease, fire, or devastation. Scientists call this dendrochronology, the study of time through trees. But I think that word is too clinical for what this actually is. What this actually is a diary, written not in ink, but in flesh, not on paper, but in the living tissue of a being that couldn't run away for what happened to it. A tree cannot flee a wildfire. It cannot migrate from a drought. It cannot pack a bag and start over in a new city. It stands. It endures. And it writes the truth of that endurance into every layer of itself. This ring, a fire in 1632. This one, a volcanic winter in 1816, the year without a summer. This cluster of thin, desperate rings, a 30-year drought that nearly killed the entire grove. But here's the part that changed the way I think about everything. The tree didn't just survive those events. It was shaped by them. The trauma didn't disappear after the fire went out. The wood that grew after the wound grew differently, denser, harder, sometimes twisted. The tree's entire architecture, its height, its lean, the direction of its branches, was permanently altered by something that happened centuries before. The wound healed, but the memory remained, written into the body, carried forward, ring after ring after ring. Now, let's talk about you. In 1966, a Canadian psychiatrist named Vivian Rakoff noticed something strange. He was treating children of Holocaust survivors, people who had never set foot in a concentration camp, who were born years after the war ended, in safe countries, in peaceful homes. And yet, they carried the symptoms. Nightmares, hypervigilance, a deep, wordless dread that something terrible was about to happen. They hadn't lived through the trauma, but they had inherited it. This observation launched decades of research into what we now call intergenerational trauma, sometimes called transgenerational trauma, the transmission of psychological, emotional, and even biological wounds from one generation to the next. And in 2015, Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York published a landmark study that shook the scientific world. She found that trauma didn't just affect the mind. It affected the body at a molecular level. Specifically, it altered the epigenome. Let me explain this simply because it matters. Your DNA is your blueprint. It doesn't change, but your epigenome, the system of chemical markers that tells your DNA which genes to turn on and which to keep off, that changes. Stress changes it. Starvation changes it. Violence changes it. Fear changes it. And here's the part that echoes through generations like a sound through a canyon. Those epigenetic changes can be passed to your children and to their children. Yehuda found that the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors had altered cortisol profiles. Their stress hormones were calibrated differently, not because of anything that happened to them, but because of what happened to someone they may have never even met. Do you see it now? The tree carries the fire in its rings. The human carries the wound in their genes. The event ends. The memory doesn't. You're not just the product of your own experiences. You are the product of every experience your lineage survived. Every famine, every war, every displacement, every loss that was too large to speak about, and so was spoken about by the body instead. That anxiety you can't explain, it might not be yours. That feeling of never being safe enough, no matter how safe you actually are, it might be an echo, a ring, a record of something that happened long before your first breath. But here is where the story deepens. Because trees don't just carry trauma alone. Beneath every old-growth forest, there is a network, a vast, invisible web of fungal threads called mycorrhizal networks, sometimes poetically called the wood wide web. Through this network, trees share resources. They send chemical signals. They warn each other of danger. When one tree is attacked by insects, it sends a chemical alarm through the fungal network, and neighboring trees begin producing defensive compounds before the insects even reach them. When a young sapling is struggling in the shade, older trees, sometimes called mother trees, send it sugars and nutrients through the roots, feeding it, keeping it alive, giving it time to grow. And when a mother tree is dying, and this is the part that breaks me open every time I think about it, she doesn't just die. She performs one final act. She dumps her remaining carbon, her nutrients, her chemical knowledge into the network. She passes everything she has, everything she learned in 3, 4, 500 years of standing in one place and paying attention to the trees that will outlive her. She gives her children her memory. This is not a metaphor I'm forcing. This is what the science says. Suzanne Samar, the forest ecologist who discovered these networks, calls it forest wisdom. The idea that old-growth forests are not just collections of individual trees. They are communities of shared memory. The young trees don't have to learn everything from scratch. They inherit defenses. They inherit strategies for drought. They inherit the chemical vocabulary of survival, just like us. Because intergenerational trauma is not the whole story. We also inherit resilience. We inherit survival. We inherit the fact that, against every odd, through every catastrophe, someone in your lineage kept going. Someone chose to live. Someone chose to love. Someone chose to bring a child into a world that had given them every reason not to. You are not just carrying their wounds. You are carrying their strength. So what do we do with this? How do you heal a wound you didn't create? How do you read the rings of your own life and make peace with the ones that were written before you? I think the forest teaches us. First, acknowledgement. A tree does not pretend its scars don't exist. The fire ring is there. The drought ring is there. They are part of the record. They are part of the truth. Healing in human psychology begins the same way, not by erasing the past, but by witnessing it, by saying, "This happened. It shaped me. I am allowed to feel its weight." Second, connection. Trees do not heal in isolation. They heal through networks, through roots that reach toward other roots, through the slow, patient exchange of what is needed. Humans are the same. We are not meant to carry intergenerational pain alone. Therapy, community, honest conversation, the simple act of telling someone, "I think I'm carrying something that isn't mine." These are our mycorrhizal networks. Third, and this is the one that matters most, new growth. After a fire, a tree doesn't stop growing. The rings after the scar are often the most beautiful, wider, more vital, as if the tree is saying, "I will not let that be my last chapter." You can be the generation that breaks the cycle, not by pretending the pain doesn't exist, not by numbing it or running from it, but by growing around it, by writing new rings, conscious, deliberate, honest rings that your children and their children will one day read. You cannot change the rings that were written before you, but you are writing one right now, today, this moment, and you get to choose what it says. There's a bristlecone pine in the White Mountains of California that is nearly 5,000 years old. It was a seedling when the pyramids were being built. It has survived every drought, every ice storm, every fire, every century of silence and upheaval that this planet has produced. And if you cut it open, which, please, no one ever should, you would find a record. 5,000 rings. 5,000 years of memory. Some wide with joy. Some thin with suffering. All of them true. It is still growing. And so are you. You're not broken by what came before you. You're the proof that it was survived. If this felt like something you needed to hear today, you're not alone. Many people find their way here when something inside them is reaching for something quieter, something deeper. If you'd like to keep exploring this space, where nature meets the mind, where forests teach us what textbooks can't, consider subscribing to the Plant Mind. Every video is a walk into the woods, and you're always welcome here. This video is for educational and reflective purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you're struggling with trauma or emotional distress, please reach out to a licensed professional who can support you.